Good morning, everybody, and welcome, as Elaine said, to AMCHAM's Women's Week, From Girls to Leaders, The Journey. This forum we originally started we wanted to do in March, but obviously those plans got tossed out of the window. But we're very lucky to be able to sneak it in before the end of the year. So thank you very much for joining us. Before I begin, I just want to take the opportunity of thanking our sponsors, Boston Scientific, as well as Philip Morris Malaysia. They're helping us make this whole series come together. So we're delighted to have them in the background and always supporting AMCHAM. This week-long program has been put together to shine the light around issues faced by women as they journey from girls into leaders, the importance of having a diverse and inclusive workforce, and hopefully enlightening us and inspiring us to do something about equality and diversity in our lives. Today, the forum will take a look at the challenges faced by the other 50% holding up the sky, raising girls, young women, and what we can do in the workspace to encourage them. Almost a decade ago, the World Bank Malaysian Economic Monitor reported how in Malaysia, the women's labor force participation remains low compared with regional and higher income peers. Participation is relatively low at all ages and decline after marriage. Unlike the double peaked pattern observed in many countries, Malaysian women tend not to return to the labor force after marriage or in childbirth. In fact, Malaysia is the only country in the region that has a single peak profile in the labor force participation of women. Whilst the pipeline of talent emerging from universities is prominently women, many are not retained in the workforce. Compared with other economies, Malaysia's labor market is less conducive to attract and retain women, including facilitating the return after a career break. This leakage of talent is also reflected in terms of levels, whereby women account for only 50% of entry-level professionals and make up only 5% of CEOs and board members. We started this week with a session with YB Hannah Yeoh, and in her conversation, we talked about the latest statistics also reflecting this, with only 55% of the female population in Malaysia currently in the workforce, compared to that of 80% are from men. So there's a lot of that we can be doing as far as increasing the productivity. And in a time where we really need to do this, post-COVID, and we want to get the women back into the workforce, I think we need to make a concerted effort to try and look at this issue. And it was very disconcerting for me when I had a conversation also very recently that post-COVID, that the focus will be on getting employment up generally. But my question then, and we'll explore this later, is whether or not the getting women back into the workforce is going to be cast back before and relegated backwards as well at this time. To get us into the first topic of the day, which is about raising girls. I've just lost my sheet here. Sorry, I apologize that. As I said, we want to get your opinions as well. So please do fill in the conversation, add to the conversation by adding questions in the chat box. We have a fabulous lineup of women and we have our, I'm going to quote, token male to joining us today. Thank you, Abdul. But I want to just say that before I introduce them, that Women's Week runs all the way till Tuesday, and I hope that you'll have an opportunity to join us at various sessions that we still have on. And let me just get started on the session of raising girls. So as I said, despite having early inclusion rates in the early part of the journey, Malaysia's female participation in the workforce is characterized by a single peak versus, say, Japan's double peak, meaning that women drop out permanently from the workforce. Why? Education and access to opportunities and a proactive support system play a vital role in enabling girls to dream big of a productive and having a productive future, about leadership roles and how they can navigate towards achieving them. Much of this stems from the reigning culture and expectations of family and peers and related perceived roles. The panel that we have today will look at the unspoken challenges. To address all of this today, we have 4 great panelists. Dr. Asma Abdullah, a cultural anthropologist at Culture Matters, who has a deep passion for corporate culture, women, and leadership. Dr. Shantini Vanyasingham, a chartered clinical psychologist at Gleneagles Hospital, with 3 decades of work in child development and clinical psychology. We also have joining us 2 senior executives from different stages of their work lives. Both have raised a son and a daughter, so we'll have perspectives from them. Abdul Rahman Abdul Hanifa, Director of Government Affairs and Policy for Malaysia General Electric. He's also a father of 2 children, a 19-year-old girl and a 17-year-old boy. And we have Chai Neo Chong, Independent Director and former CEO of IBM, and also member of AMCHAM, whose 2 children, also a girl and a boy, slightly older, 25 and 23 respectively. So welcome everybody today, and it's great to have you all there with us. So I want to address that single peak issue that we have in existence in Malaysia. We have 2 industry experts and 2 industry executives with us today. So I'd like to ask you, maybe first, Abdul, in your experience, what have you observed as to why women choose or do not return, not necessarily by choice, to the workforce and or to re-enter the workforce once they've left? Abdul.
Thanks, Siobhan. Am I clear in audio? Very good. So thanks for inviting me for this. I do feel a little bit as a minority here, but I know I'm in great company, so thank you for accepting me. Not coming from a studies perspective, but more from my personal observation and experience. I mean, the classical reasons are, of course, marriage and childcare and also elderly care. But we've also seen women leave the workforce due to moving, following their spouses' careers, which sometimes takes more precedence depending on the family decisions. Health reasons. I just wanted to provide one perspective. GE is very much an infrastructure engineering type environment. So we hire a lot of technical folks. And when you look at the ratio of women in the workforce, and when you slice it down to different sort of job categories or functions, you have to look at it from a representative perspective, right? Let me give you an example. Say aviation technicians. Typically, say in a year, if you have 100 graduates coming out of different schools in Malaysia, probably 80 of them would be male and maybe 20 would be female, right? So on the onset itself, you have a smaller pool. So for us to have a expectation of say 50% female participation in that job category is above and beyond industry average or industry norm. So when you look at that, come from it from that perspective, I think when you have a lower base, so when you lose a female employee, the impact of that is greater just from the mathematics of it. So not a new perspective to share so much, but that's what we've been experiencing. I've been experiencing across my career.
Over to you, Chai Neo. Do you have a perspective from your time at IBM and in other aspects?
Yeah, so I think Siobhan, good morning everybody. Can you hear me well? Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I think Siobhan, you may know that I actually left the workforce not once but twice, and actually came back to work. So kind of a triple harm, not even double harm. So I think the opportunity for women to come back to work is there. And as Abdul mentioned, I think a lot has to do with personal preferences. Okay, first of all, when we talk about why women leave the workforce, I agree with Abdul, a lot has to do with juggling family and work. And I think secondly, which is not really much spoken about, is actually many of them feel that their personal aspirations are not met. For many reasons, one could be because they feel that the progression for them has not been there. And I think that to some extent, some believe that there is a glass ceiling, so they can't progress upwards, and as such, they leave. Secondly, is that also the lack of support system in the office and outside, which means that in the office is obviously peers, bosses, etc., and outside mostly family, friends. And I touched a little bit on the not having the support system in the office because for example, Abdul mentioned if you are in an environment where most of the people there are men, and they don't have the same, I would say, commitment to family responsibilities, the empathy may not be there. And also, if you are in an environment where you see all your male colleagues moving up, progressing and getting promotions and you don't, you leave, right? Because it's not worth going to work and not getting the recognition that you need. So I just want to touch on this particular aspect, Siobhan, and I must say that personally I have been fortunate because even when I left the workforce, I've been given the assurance that whenever I'm ready, please come back. So I left twice to take care of my children and actually came back twice. And then about 2 years after I came back, the last in 2014, a year after that, I was promoted to be MD of IBM Malaysia. So that speaks to the opportunities and the ability for me to achieve my aspirations. Otherwise, I would have gone back, after 2 breaks, right? So that's kind of perspective.
Thank you, Chanyo. I'd like to bring Dr. Asma into this conversation. Culturally, Chanyo and I think Abdul touched on a little bit is about belief, in belief, and that their roles and responsibility. In looking at the culture that Malaysia has, can you just touch on perhaps what culture the women are walking into when they're in the workforce and what the debate is internally? Dr. Asma? Have we lost Dr. Asma?
I think, Dr. Asma, you just need to unmute yourself.
Dr. Asma, if you can hear us, maybe could you hit unmute? I can see you. No? Okay. Maybe we can come back to Hello. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you and good morning, everyone. Yes, I think what is important is to look at the landscape that we have in the country. And somehow I find that, in Malaysia, you have to accept the fact that this is a patriarchal society, where men takes charge and women are not always given the due recognition. But I guess times are changing, but what we have to put in place are systems and structures that will enable women, like what Ms. Chong said just now, that she's able to go back, into the workforce because of the support system and the support services. And I think this is one of the things that I think we need to push, in terms of structures, providing opportunities for them to build their careers, get married and start a family. That somehow is not looked into seriously. So really, I think you need to look at the social structure, the employment structure. Perhaps we need to remodel the employment structure so that women are given greater flexibility, to integrate work and life by providing opportunities for them to build their careers. And I think this is somehow missing. We're not there yet. We can never be where, you see a group of women, in the Finnish parliament. I don't know whether we ever get there because of the landscape that we have. I think I'll stop here.
Okay. I mean, I think, have you seen a change over the last, say, 4 decades in the shift? Has there been a shift in the last 4 decades or so?
Women are making an entry into the workforce, but somehow there are hidden barriers. There's so many. I guess we can talk about the elephants in the room, and some of these elephants in the room issues are not addressed out there. somehow or other there is a reluctance to bring it out, and if you do bring them out, you may be seen as too much of an activist, and people don't like when you champion something, that would disturb the harmony. Recognizing that this society is a harmony-driven culture, so you got to be very careful about introducing anything that will disturb the harmony. So that is why I feel that you need to understand the landscape that we are in. And if it is patriarchy, it's hierarchy, and maybe I should also use the word masculine. I think we need to unpack those terms, so that our girls who grow up will recognize the landscape that they are in. Otherwise, you'll be hitting a wall, but you don't know what it is.
So conversations like this that we're having today probably help to expose people to some of those words, some of those concepts. Dr. Shantini, I'm going to ask you a question. You deal with women and children, but you also deal with couples. So that's the older generation that's in the workforce. Do you see this this duopoly, this play and struggle in women wanting to go back in the workforce and struggling with the balance of family life? You have to unmute yourself, Dr. Shantini.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Yes, I sometimes do see that in families. But coming back to what Dr. Asma was saying and about the landscape, I think working to change the landscape is very important, or attempting to change the landscape is very important. And this starts from the home, from the families. Fathers, I think, play a particularly important role here. Not just to raising girls, but raising boys and girls, because the father is the main, the role model. That if he says things like, "I'm really proud of your mother. She's very determined and she's pursuing her career," that's a really good thing. And if he also plays a role in shared care at home, these are roles which are modeled to both boys and girls. And I think boys play an equal role in also attempting to change this landscape, because this is where they first get encouraged. And quite often, what I see is a pattern where maybe this doesn't happen initially, but when the say a father is raising girls, and when they get older, that's when I think the fathers are supporting their daughters, and they may have suddenly recognized that they possibly didn't support their wives in that kind of way, because the father steps in really, and they become aware of the challenges that maybe the daughters might present and might have. The other thing I think that should also come first from the families is that girls and boys need to be aware of, yes, it's a patriarchal society that they might be going into, and how do you deal with that? What kinds of things should you attempt to push? You need to be aware of what you're going into. You need to be aware that, okay, yes, you can study, you can pursue your career, you can get qualified, but you've got to deal with other things that come with the landscape. And how do you challenge them and as Dr. Asma says, sometimes when you challenge them, you can be perceived as being aggressive and you can threaten the whole system. But there are ways of working around it. And I think firstly in the families, that should actually change. And then in the school system, that should be encouraged. There's a lot of role modeling there with teachers as well. There can be videos, there can be a lot of things that are shown in schools where they've highlighted women in positions of in top careers, women that come in and play a role. I mean, there's a lot of gender stereotyping. There's certain roles that are given to women, as Abdul was saying, that in certain professions, there are more women, men in that. And like professions like teaching, there are a lot more women. Nursing, I mean, when you talk to kids about a nurse, imagine your first visualization is that a female person. You don't think of a male, you think about a midwife. You don't think about a male, you think about a female person. So you've got to actually challenge those gender stereotyping in schools. That has to be something that has to be addressed. And you can do that through a lot of role play, awareness, debates. That's when you actually change the landscape. And that's where you see, and boys are encouraged to play that role as well as girls. Boys are encouraged to actually support women there. And that's when you see that, and that comes from a school system, then chances are in the workforce that will also continue. We have the hope that that would continue. There's another point that I would like to pick up on what Dr. Asma was saying, is looking at the subtle discrimination that women face in the workforce. It's very subtle. Are they included in? You know, there might be a group. I've never seen that. I've never seen. I have friends who play golf with their colleagues, but I don't see them asking their women colleagues to play. It's usually boys. So there's all this little subtle discrimination that happens, snooker, those kinds of things. And I think that people should be made aware of that and maybe be a bit more inclusive and include women there. So women face a lot more challenges, I think, and makes it harder for them. And therefore, maybe they give up. They think it's going to be a long, hard road up the top, and the system doesn't actually encourage them. And then they drop out. They may go and do something else. They may do their own business. They may not stay in that workforce because the challenge is just too much. They're faced with a lot. Financial challenges as well. Increments. I don't know how increments are given. If you're a single woman, that might be more challenging. Maybe employers might be more inclined to give increments to pay rises to men who have families to support. Maybe single women there's more demanded of them because maybe they can work longer hours because they don't have to go back to their families. So it's not just married women, it's single women also that need to be, this issue needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much, Akshay. There's so much there I want to unpack on. There's so many pieces there, but let me just go back to Abdul. You've raised a boy and a girl. You're still raising them. They're in their late teens. Maybe if you can pick up on some of the pieces that Dr. Shantini talked about, and just dive in.
I would love. I was going to put my hand up. I felt like she was talking to some degree, you know.
Oh gosh.
Well, perhaps I can sort of let my guard down a little bit and share some personal, sort of experiential insights. We don't have all the answers, right? My daughter taught me a great deal about a lot of things, about my mother, about my wife. The father-daughter relationship when she was young, it was easy and great. I was the alpha, the patriarch, and I have sort of the not to say tyrannical position, but as the alpha and as the provider, you get the last word. It was easy, but as she turned 12, 13, a lot of things changed, right? Suddenly she had a will, a mind, and I had to deal with that, and I didn't know how. I have a boy who's 2 years younger, and that was easier, far easier, because I have experience being a boy. I know the emotions and the psychology that goes on behind. So I had to quickly go through a rapid learning period, right? I did a lot of reading, spoke to a lot of folks. I'm an engineer by training and a male, so I tend to be empirical, logical, heavy into planning. So I take things in a very methodical way. And I went through a big search, and we went through our own tumultuous, back and forth. And of course, like Dr. Asma also was saying, through globalization, through westernization and media, I'm not a classical Asian, culturally not classically Asian. I mean, maybe fundamentally we are, but sort of the contemporary culture is almost global and progressive, right? So I'm coming to realize, and YB Hannah also mentioned this, it's about raising children for their future, right? Not for the future that we went through. So you also have to know what's evolving in the external landscape. and the dynamics and the uncertainties that they're going to face. So it's really about empowering and raising resilient young children, right? So I decided that I won't be so prescriptive. I decided that I needed to learn and sense the signals that are coming out from them, to understand where their interests are. And even from a career guidance perspective, it was difficult because it's too early to decide on a long-term career, but it needed to be based on other signals. Like, my daughter was leaning towards the arts. She reads widely, she writes well, she argues very well. So that's kind of where the career pathing hopefully would go towards, right? My son was more physical. He likes sports, he likes science, so a different direction. So it's not so much about equality in raising them, but understanding what their needs are and where their natural inclinations are, and then guide them through along those lines. Till today, I'm not sure I have all the answers, and I don't, because the external environment keeps changing. But I decided if I stick true to some of these principles of reading the signals, where their interests are, God willing, they will have a fulfilling life and career into the future.
Okay, thank you, Abdul. Did your daughter ask you? Did she pose questions to you regarding her role in society as she was growing up, and was that a conversation that you had?
I'm not. It's a very profound question, right? A role in society for a 17, 18-year-old. I think she was grappling with her own identity and what she wants to do. But as she went into college, suddenly all the pages started opening up, all the possibilities. She showed interest in psychology, and then later she wanted to do law, and now she's kind of settling into some space of philosophy and economics. Still thick in a discovery phase. That's kind of where we are. It's a work in progress.
Chainyo, you had two slightly older children already in university, graduating. Any insights from your raising of kids and reflecting on what Dr. Sanchatini spoke about?
Yes, I think totally in agreement with Dr. Sorry, I forget pronunciation.
Shantini.
Yeah, Shantini. Actually, my father, he was ahead of times, right, in his first generation. So he brought us up to be gender agnostic. So I did computer science. My sister did computer science. I have a sister who did mechanical engineering. So we are all in this science field without any barriers with regards to who we should be or who we could be. And just to give a perspective, right? So I have got my daughter did psychology and psychiatry. She did computer masters already. My son also did psychology. So he decided that he didn't want to continue studying. And there were no stereotypes. We did not impose our views on them. And I think the fact that my sisters and myself, the fact that we ourselves, we are in corporate. I was MD of IBM Malaysia. My sister is chairman of Accenture in China. And then, I've got nieces who are in engineering, in computer science. I mean, we are a whole family of STEM graduates, and there was no barrier of any sort, male, female, girls, boys. We just chose whatever profession we chose. There was no influence from the parents. And I think the fact that we had a lot of engineers and computer science graduates in my family, the girls automatically gravitated towards computer science and engineering. And because my father, I can still remember from very young, my father said that girls or boys, you will get equal opportunities. It is your decision. You work hard, you study hard, and there are opportunities opening up for you. I will support you all the way. And I think that was how I brought up my daughter and son. And like my son loves to cook, so there is no stereotyping, right? My son will cook for my daughter to eat when they were in UK together. So I think that nurturing a child from a very young age really sets the mindset for the future. And for the girls in my family, you know, there's no limit. We work, we have a family, we pursue aspirations, and we also have spouses who support us. You know, I think it's all like kind of like it starts from the mindset, right? You think that there is no barrier, so there's no barrier. And then you think to yourself, my spouse will support me and your spouse will support you. So that has been my experience and also how I raised my children.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chanyo. I think I think everybody is on this call have had a supportive background in order to enable us to be where we are, whether we're male or female. And I think that is testament to having that's the fundamental support. But I would say the majority of the people outside don't necessarily always have that. And as what Dr. Asma was saying, you know, what can we be doing in our lives to help? And what can we be doing in our workspace and with our friends to move this along? Dr. Asma, I know you just mentioned that if we talk about it too much, we get branded as being an activist, and that causes challenges. But does that mean we should stop doing this? Should we, especially right now where COVID has, as I said, realigned everything? So, you know, do you have any insights as to what we could be doing in society and where we could be playing a role?
Well, I think we have to develop systems. You know, we have to look for new ways of raising girls, because like Abdullah was saying about the new workplace or the global workplace requires you to shift, no longer be too traditional or too conservative or too old school, right? You have to be open to diversity. You know, the issue is diversity now. So we need to get people who are comfortable to work with different cultures, you know, different work settings. Like, you know, AMCHAM is really a multinational. I mean, you're addressing girls who want to enter what I consider to be the cross-cultural workplace. Now, the cross-cultural workplace, which I spent a number of years, and I think Ms. Chong also, because you are in IBM, and also Abdul. So we have that kind of experience, but our girls are also going into the intracultural workplace, which is predominantly one ethnic group, and then the intercultural, which is diversity, the Malaysian diversity, and then the cross-cultural workplace, which is American, British, European, whatever. So if you want to train these girls, you know, what are you training them for? If you're training them for a homogeneous work setting, which could be Malay or Chinese, it has a different flavor from those who are entering the cross-cultural American workplace. So as a result, you need to expose our girls to a range of workplaces. And I find that based on my work, you know, that orientation is very different, because otherwise you will feel very strange in an American workplace if you had all along been schooled in a homogeneous setting.
Yep.
So this is why I think we have to develop new ways of educating girls. And I know that based on the research that I'm doing, that you need to develop a setting where the girls, no boys around, because if you have boys around, the boys will take charge, and then the girls will not have any opportunities to be the president of the club or the key roles, right? So in other words, you have to create a system where the girls can take leadership roles right at an early age, you know, rather than be allowing the boys to take charge. So meaning, when they go to school, you really have to expose them to leadership positions. And this is where I find they have to learn drama, they have to learn how to talk, they have to learn how to write, they have to learn to deal with diversity, you know, at an early age. And I don't know how you do that in our government schools, but perhaps organizations can come into the picture to sponsor activities for women, for girls, for girls to take charge. It could be volunteerism, it could be internship, lots of other opportunities that organizations can sponsor as part of your outreach programs, and yeah. So I think that there has to be some new ways of developing this new world of girls becoming leaders, and it has to start at an early age by exposing them to the challenges of the global workplace.
Mm-hmm. There was so much richness in there, Dr. Asma. Anybody would like to, of my panelists, want to jump in there?
Mm-hmm. Well,
China, you have to unmute yourself, China, if you want
to. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, it's just a conversation, so jump in anytime.
Jump in because Dr. Asma. So that kind of I recall like when we grew up, we had many all-girls school. I'm not sure about Siobhan, but I certainly went to an all-girls school right up to 17 years old. And I think I just wanted to kind of agree with your point that because we were in all-girls school, there was no discrimination on gender, right? So we fought on equal footing when it comes to gender. And I think that gave a lot of the people I knew at least who were in school and were given prefects, head prefects, and leadership roles, that they grew up. And if I look at my friends who went through that process, they grew up to be confident and kind of like gender agnostic to a large extent, because you grew up like until 17 years old. We were in an all-girls school. There was nothing to compete. There was no boys to compete with. And then you go up to, your sixth form, like in my case, sixth form was a co-ed. And then we go into university, again co-ed. But what was important was the seed was already there. So you seeded from young that, there was no discrimination up to 17. Once you are 18 and above, I think we can, somehow, because of the strong foundation, we have built the confidence, and then we have had the experience leading, that it became quite natural for us to compete on equal grounds with guys. I mean, that's my personal experience. I wanted to kind of jump in and agree with your point about seeding very early.
Well, yeah, China, I have to say that I did go to mostly co-ed schools, but I did have a stint in an all-girls school, and I have to say my initial reaction was it was scary.
Scary because what, Siobhan? Scary because
I just found it incredibly not as supportive as I expected it to be. And maybe because I went in later in it, but I have to say that I was very glad to go back to the co-ed environment when it happened. It was like, oh, thank God, back to normalcy. But I hear what you are saying. But Dr. Asma, I do think there are things that we need to be doing, each of us, in incorporating diversity at a young age. And exposing our children and the people. And it's not just about gender diversity, it's right across the board. And as you said, cultural diversity to non-homogeneous societies. So whether it's outside of the Malay confine or the Chinese confine or the Indian confine, to bring that diversity in, entering the workforce, they are better prepared to engage with that diversity, whether it's, so I do think maybe a stint in a single-sex school would be good, but get them out there so they can actually play in the real world. Dr. Shantini, you were about to say something as well.
Yes. I think as well, looking at the education system, as Dr. Asma was saying, that some systems need to be put into place. I agree with that. And I think that teachers have a very important role to play, because this is where, children are actually taught that they can challenge barriers. They can actually, make a difference when they actually start working to challenge it in a manner which doesn't have to be aggressive, but actually to speak up for what is important. And looking at gender equality, being in an all-girls school is good, because you're driven to work really hard, and you're not having to dealing with the gender differences. But I think it's also important to have that, because in the real world you're going to be working and you're going to be exposed to men. And I think getting those ideas, it's important for men to also, for boys to see that the head prefect is actually a girl. it's important for men to be comfortable with that, to see that that's okay and that's possible, and I have to accept it, because that's, otherwise they're going to think that, you know, that role is primarily for a man, or CEO's role is primarily for a man. I think they need to be exposed to seeing women in leadership roles. I think that's equally important. That's what I was going to say.
Chandini, have you ever come across a co-ed school where the head prefect is a girl?
Well, I have, but it's an international school where they have two. They have a boy and a girl.
Okay.
They have a boy and a girl, so they share that role. Yes, but it's interesting. Yes, but maybe not primarily a girl. You're right. You're right. So that's something that perhaps they need to work at actually changing, and also working towards what you know, that the school plays that role, the headmaster, the board, that they need to take that role.
Yeah, I think you've both touched on, everybody's touched on the one core element we wanted to discuss in this week, which is confidence. How do you instill confidence for the girl to step up to take that position, you know, and to believe that they can be the head prefect, you know, and go to the headmistress and talk to them and take up and have the confidence to expose their dreams to people who may or may not. And later on, I think we're going to be talking in the week, is the resilience that a child might need to have.
That's right. That's right. So the earlier you expose them to leadership positions, the better. That is why in the qualitative research that I'm doing about leadership for girls and women, I find that you have to expose them to debating societies. They've got get up there, speak up, you know, give their point of view, and then keep on pursuing. Yeah, but if they don't have training, it'll be very difficult. So this is where I hope more organizations will sponsor debating societies or drama or, you know, talking shop. Like, you know, I spent a number of years in Toastmasters because that was the only place for me to learn how to speak, you know. So I think we need to expose our girls to speaking. I think by being able to debate well, being able to articulate their point of view, that is one entry point. Otherwise, they'll be so, you know, knowing the culture. I'm a Malay, knowing the cultural programming of a Malay child, it's going to be tough. You have to learn how to speak up, but you don't want to be rude. You know, while we allow people to speak, to want to utter a point of view, you got to be very careful about how you speak up. You know, in a culture where you know, being too assertive can have its adverse consequences. So this is why I feel that if you train them how to speak, how to debate, how to utter a point of view, I think that is a start.
And I agree with that. I think women need to know, and girls need to know where to pitch themselves.
Yeah.
They need to know where that pitch is and where to go in at that pitch, because otherwise they're going to be perceived as being aggressive. You know,
Exactly.
So the pitch has to be right there where they are assertive. And that takes training. I agree. That takes a lot of training. And the other method is by showing them role models, by you know, role models with Asian women, with powerful women in their own culture. They don't have to just look at women in the West. Look around you. Look at Asia. Look at the number of women prime ministers we've had. You know, Bandaranaike in India, all those places. So I think they need to be exposed to that, and they need to see that. They need to see video clips of that. I think that's important. You know, but pitching yourself is very, very important.
Now, you know, this world is all about pitching, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all about being out there on LinkedIn, Facebook, and what no.
If I could just add a comment on this, you know, I'm sure my colleague from IBM and Dr. Asma previously from oil and gas, you know, we have affinity group. We have a GE Women Network affinity group where there are activities, training around confidence building, communications, stress management, resiliency, leadership, which are sort of tilted towards the female in the workforce and how to navigate their careers. There are also programs on or pairings of mentorships and coaching and this highlighting of women in unique roles. For example, we have a female engineer, power plant engineer in Saudi Arabia, and we've done a feature video on her, which is shared globally. We have a whole female crew of power plant service engineers in, I think, Venezuela, that is very active in doing a lot of work now during the COVID crisis. So when we think about scaling aspects of either attracting or retaining women in the workforce or guiding or encouraging women more towards STEM education, I find highlighting and inspiring as a viable method to scale. Right? There's the classical training and programmatic approach you can do, but the highlighting and the showcasing really inspires others.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
China,
you jump in. Yeah, so I agree with everything that has been said, and I think that going back to the topic of resiliency, there's one area that confidence is one thing, resiliency is the other thing. So Siobhan brought up this thing about resiliency. In my 30 years experience, 30-odd experience working with a lot of people, men and women, I find that the men are more resilient. So how do we build resiliency in the girls? They tend to be more sensitive, and they take failure very personally. They take criticisms very personally, and it gets very tiring if you take a lot of things personally. And I find the difference between my men colleagues and women colleagues is that the men colleagues, they tend to kind of brush things off and then they move on. So that resiliency is a very important factor, because while you can bring a woman to a position, a higher position, but to keep them there is another challenge. Because as I said, women tend to take a lot of things personally, right? And you got kind of to say, this is business, this is not personal. Kind of like get on with it. So I think that's the part that I try hard to inculcate in my daughter as well, because I find that she's more sensitive than my son. My son who tends to brush things off, and I notice that in my colleagues as well. Because they're so focused on the end goal, where they want to go, that they actually kind of like leave this. I call it to them small matters aside, but the woman tends to kind of like it will stew them, they will simmer on it, they will think about it, they got all these voices that comes to their head. Oh, I failed, and then if you sit them down and say, no, you have not failed. It is an experience, and now you have the extra experience, right, to move on to the next level. So that part of resiliency to me is so important, because I see that it's like getting there is one thing, but keeping the leaders there is yet another challenge. Women leaders.
If I can just add to that, I think what I find very useful is this three circles, right? Your circle of influence, circle of concern, and your circle of control. So what you can control. Then the next layer is what you can possibly influence, and then there are things that I just can't influence, like the economy and the politics, right? So you kind of marshal how much emotional energy you put into each one of these circles. And especially now with VUCA and COVID, you need perspective. Otherwise, you'll go, your wheels will come off. You'll derail. So I find that very useful framework in conversation, and I use that with my children. I use that with my spouse, and even with my mother, who has a big heart and has a lot of empathy and gets worked up on a lot of things that she has no control over.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that's really useful, because it's important for people to be able to realize that and be able to compartmentalize to a certain extent what is important and what they can't control, and to let go of that. But one more thing I'd just like to say is that I think also young girls, and in schools and at home and outside, they need to also be encouraged to support other women. Women should support women. And sometimes I don't see that so much. I think they're quite competitive, because it's a struggle to get to the top. I think they could be more supportive to other women in the industry. I think that awareness also should be made.
I totally agree with that. Maybe that was the 4 years of girls' school that became very apparent to me. But it is. I think it's something that we all need to do. We all very consciously, as women, need to support other women, encourage women to take that extra step, to take the moment, to brush it off, as you said, Chainil. Sometimes we do take it very personally. I have to stop myself every now and again, absorbing all that energy into myself, and just say no. It's something I just have to learn from that experience and carry on. We've been having a lot of conversations in the office about purpose. If you understand the end purpose, a lot of the other decisions and other behaviors kind of gel together much more easily. So, understanding your end goal, at least having an end goal, will help you move in that direction. But yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned school a few times. A lot of today's parents work. They are in the office, maybe even dual working parents, but they leave a lot of the upbringing I see to the schools. So how much responsibility? How do we make the schools a better environment? Because it's not really. Is it the teacher's role to raise your child?
I think teachers play. Especially in primary school, it's the primary school teachers, standard 1, standard 2, standard 3. They're really extended parents, really. Yes. So yes, I think they have a of course they don't have the sole responsibility to raising the child, but they play a very, very big role. And so it's also in training the teachers, the education system, providing that kind of support for the teachers and providing that mindset for the teachers, because they can influence children and inspire children greatly. And this is the step where you spend a lot of time out. If there wasn't a COVID pandemic, look at the number of hours children spend at school. It's a lot. And also the extracurricular activities. Again, it's the teachers that also play an important role there. Because it's an extension of the household, especially when they're younger, below 12. It's really an extension. That's important, I think.
So I want to raise a different question. There doesn't seem to be very many questions coming in from the audience, just a lot of nodding heads in agreement. But this current situation where we're all working from home, okay, the gender roles, the stresses on the gender roles that are being placed. And I'm wondering whether we can talk about whether what you think the outcome of that might be. Partners are being asked to take an equal role in the raising of the child, on watching their child do their online learning, and I know I think, China, you're outside of this right now, but I'm sure you have colleagues going through it. But where do you think the new work from home environment is going to impact gender roles from the parent side as well as from the children? Maybe I can go to you, Shantini, Dr. Shantini, to kind of address that.
Yeah, I had to think about that this morning, actually. I think there's an opportunity that's quite a good thing, because then they can see it's more equal. Mom is working on the computer, dad is working on the computer, and they can see that it's a little bit more balanced, and then dad has the opportunity to actually play that role, and with supporting the child in the household, with shared care. So I see it as an opportunity. What the outcome is, I hope it will be positive, but I really see it as an opportunity, because this is where the child begins to see that, mom's actually working. I can actually see that. She doesn't just cook the meal before she goes, or she goes off somewhere, but I don't know where she goes. So I think that it's an opportunity for children to see that. It's an opportunity for fathers to play a role in the childcare, helping with the online schoolwork, etc. It's a great opportunity, but well, I'm hoping that it might change the view a little bit.
I think we have to accept this new this VUCA world, right? It's coming in. The concept of work. What is work? You know, do you work at your computer, or do you work in a social setting? You know, what is, again, the landscape of work, right? Because before we thought we go to office and we work, but now we work. You just come to your computer and you work. So what is the concept of work? And a girl growing up now, you know, I don't know, our children who are now having to study at home, and they see their parents working at the computer. Is that work? Or is it just playing with video games? So I think this is the conversation that we need to have with our children. What is the concept of work? You know, if the concept of work is going to change, I don't know how we're going to tell our school girls, our girls, you know, what is it that you need to be prepared? You know, to go to work or to go to your computer, and that's work. Yeah, you know, I really think that we need to start thinking, you know, what is work?
I think if I may jump in, I think I agree with Dr. Asma and Dr. Santini also. I think, Siobhan, this is kind of my perspective, right, of how this will change post-COVID-19. Today, you see that a lot of people lost jobs, and you see a lot of entrepreneurship coming up. I'm not sure whether you're aware, but you can buy almost anything online and from any part of Malaysia, right? And I think that this whole post-COVID world is ideal for women. Really, really ideal. And the reason I say that is because, again, you know, the way the COVID-19 has changed the way people communicate. You know, let's say, for example, I took time off from work to be at home with my kids. If I had a business I could do at home, for example. So then this whole concept of employment, right, also changes, because just because you are not an employee for an organization doesn't mean that you're not working, right? And if I look at I am now interacting with lots of platforms, you know, we call it platform, all these marketplaces and platforms that I'm interacting with. I will say, if I just kind of like, just look around without having any formal data, 70 to 80% are women. So a lot of businesses from home are now being placed on the e-commerce platform, and women are finding, and I mean, I've got food, I've got muruku delivered to me, I've got, you know, kueh bangkit, Chinese New Year is coming, all the cookies are coming out, and you know, 80% are women, and the people who delivered also women. Online, also women. Now that's maybe a very, I don't know, maybe very unique to the cookies world. But I noticed that a lot of women are now, you know, kind of like, it's a very comfortable place for women, I think. And this whole thing about work-life balance, sorry?
Entrepreneurs.
Yes, this whole work-life balance is coming to some kind of a balance, right? And I really find that, and then service. You know, I have my women suppliers, right? They'll be calling you up to tell you it's coming next week by what time. Oh, I'm on the way. Sorry, I'm 5 minutes late. This whole service-oriented, entrepreneurial, service-oriented, e-commerce based business, to me, is playing really well for women. And you may not call that employment. It is business, but it is work. So, I mean, just wanted to put this point across, because we are going to see more and more of this in the post-COVID world. Not just COVID world, but post-COVID world.
Yeah.
If I can just chime in on that, extending on that idea, I came across this distinction between future of work and work of the future. So, you know, the work of the future, a lot of work today will be annihilated. A lot of things that are repetitive, you know, will be taken over by robots, chatbots, you know, bank tellers, all that will go away, right? So there'll be new types of work. So what is the future of work itself? And, you know, you talked about heavy on e-commerce, but for those of us who sort of remain in the workforce or kind of bridge into the future, we also need new competencies, new skill sets and new mindsets. You know, digital is clearly, entrepreneurship is clearly, you know, there's new models of consumer behaviorism that is changing business models. So it's, you know, there's a lot of change. That's why, you know, what the world that we grew up in and what we were driven was to excel, right? Like what Hannah was saying. But the coming future, the coming generation is, they have to be resilient. They have to be adaptive. It's not knowledge. Knowledge is a few clicks away. its skills and adaptability, and the choices that they have, the variabilities that they're going to experience, the spin rate and the cycle rate is 10 to 100x what we experienced. So that bewilders me as a steward to my two children, right? How am I going to steer them if I can resource them, I can fund their education, I can share what I know, but it's not enough. In fact, this conversation has given rise to an idea to me that I need to start a GE men's network. We have a women's network, but the male's influence on all of these is also very high. We're not a hidden factor.
I agree. Yeah.
Invite us to talk.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I think, this puts to me, the opportunity where I think organizations like us, AMCHAM, actually provide an opportunity to bring these conversations and mix it up, not just necessarily with one company, but with companies that, for example, if it's all in GE, it's very one sort of focus. But if I can bring a conversation from somebody from the financial services or from another industry and bring it together, I think there's opportunities for platforms like this to exist, and hopefully we encourage our members to participate in, because it's these conversations I think that we really need to have now, because we're in the middle of the change and we can all be part of that change. So I hope that everybody is listening can think about it and be part of that, and not just to make suggestions, but come and be part of that conversation as well. I think also that I think we need to have a word with the World Bank and a few other people on how they measure us. And this, as you said, it's not employment but business. Are you unproductive because you're not employed? What is productivity? And we need to be looking at some of those areas. We've only got about 5 or 6 minutes left, so I would like to maybe take a moment to go around to each of you, and also just before I do that, I'd like to invite, see if anybody's online who would like to raise their hands and ask our panelists here a question. As I said, they've been very quiet in writing questions, but maybe they might stick their hand up and see whether or not they have a question to ask. So let me see if anybody is brave enough to come up, and we have a number of people on here. And someone just put the hand down. Hang on a second, that's not loud. Put your hand up. We've got 4 great panelists here. Do you want to ask anybody any question? So we'll give them a few minutes to find the up. We have Li Wei.
Yes, hi.
Unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Li Wei. I'm from Intel, and I actually wanted to just comment on the fact that Abdul just called out what I wanted to ask is getting the majority men to talk about this topic. I realize because I work with gender diversity a lot in our company, a lot of time is the women get together talking about what they need to do. But I think it really has to start with, I think we touched on that earlier on, is getting the father to role model, getting the father to be the advocates, and having maybe a men's group of some sort would certainly, it's a start. I think it's time for us to have that conversation between men and women instead of just the women talking among themselves on how we need to do. Periodically get some men in this case bringing Abdul in and talk about the men's viewpoint. So that's where my comment is, and I was just wondering if any of you know in any MNC out there that is looking at setting up this men's group, because I heard in other countries they started to do that, mostly in Europe, US, and Latin America, and I haven't heard much about Asia.
Interesting. I think that not only men, I think women must know how to bring up their son. Because
Yes.
to make any significant change, you have to start with the mothers. How mothers raise their sons, relate to their fathers and the men in general. Because I think that is not a conversation that we are doing, you know, for boys and girls. So the women, you know, we have to engage the mothers, because any change, it has to start in the home. And in the home, the mothers play a key role. So the mothers have to start thinking, you know, what should I do with my son? And the son is going to change their woman.
Yeah, I agree. I think the son brings a lot of that perspective into their school on how they treat their fellow schoolmates, and they also bring that into certainly their workplace and into their homes when they have children as well.
Can I just add to that? It's also the sons watching the father role model. So, you know, again, it's mother. Yes, I agree with you, but it's how the sons can also learn a lot from how the father treats the women in the family. So, you know, they're watching that, and like I said, you know, I think both parents play a very, very big role here.
If I can just make a plug on both these points, I just stepped out to grab one of my favorite books. It's called Strong Fathers.
A bit closer, Abdul.
I can't see it. Sorry.
A bit closer there.
How's that? No,
Okay.
it's blurry. Sorry.
Maybe a bit lower. Yeah, maybe a bit lower. I think. Yes.
Okay,
good. Yeah.
Okay, there we
Yes,
go.
yes.
Strong fathers, strong daughters. Right.
Yeah.
I picked up a lot of good tips from this, and to Dr. Asma's point, the author Meg Meeker also wrote a book called Strong Mothers, Strong Sons. So your idea, you know, is has been researched and published. So it's, you know, as we close off here, I just wanted to share my big insight and takeaway here is really we are patriarchal. That's unlikely to change. The male has been given a unique, a position, some sense of authority, some sense of responsibility in society. And I guess with that comes the responsibility to exercise that, right? You don't want to squander it away, and to exercise that, you got to do it well. So you have to know what you have and apply it appropriately. And back to the purpose that Siobhan mentioned at AMCHAM, right? What is your purpose? Why are you here? What's your role as a father? And if you're unclear of that and you haven't figured that out, that muck cascades through the family and probably into and beyond. So if there's one takeaway or one message from me is, I think fathers have a very critical role to play, and you better get on it.
Yeah, just to comment from me, Siobhan, is that I think that all said and done, I think that we also have to acknowledge that a lot of progress has been made. If I look back the last 35 years, I was in the workforce and now continue to be on the boards, I certainly see a lot more acceptance of women in leadership roles and also opportunities, whether it's government or organizations themselves. So I think, you know, while we talk about the challenges, I think we have seen a lot of improvements. And I look at my children, at least my son and daughter, I don't think I sense any resistance on my daughter's side to grow into leadership roles. And I also don't see my son relinquishing. That means he himself is like, you know, he doesn't feel like, you know, I'm entitled to authority or leadership roles. My daughter, on the other hand, she aspires to it. So I see a boy and a girl, and it's kind of opposite, right? The boy is saying, look, you know, I want to pursue my passion. It's okay if I'm not in a corporation. My daughter is saying, corporation looks like a place I want to be, and let me develop myself to go into a corporate world. Now, both my husband and I, we were from corporate world, so it's not as if only the mother was, you know, that I was in a corporate role and my husband is not. But anyway, I think I just want to say that things have really improved, my view, over the last, you know, maybe 10, 20 years. And that we should continue on the journey. So not make people feel that, hey, you know, we are having all these challenges and we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I really think that we are making good progress. Okay, so I can. So that's
Thank you. Dr. Asma, if you'd like to have a few last words.
Yeah, I think what is coming across to me is we need to develop a new set of competencies. We don't know what they are, and we need to explore them in terms of the pandemic world and all that. New set of competencies that will give the confidence, the courage, for our girls to try. This and in fact, I think in schools, I don't know whether we will ever abolish exams, but we need to make sure that when they leave the schools, they have a set of competencies that they can use.
Great. And lastly, Shantini, any last words?
Well, I think I would like to say that, it's an ongoing process, so for parents, for fathers, for mothers, and people around, I think you need to make yourself aware, read books, gain knowledge, and then continue to actually expand on it, and then make those changes. You may not have done it when your child was 3 or 4. Your child might be 20. You can still do it. So it's something that has to be done continually, and it grows. So the opportunity is there. Just make yourself aware, get yourself informed, and slowly make those changes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, all 4 of you, for being here and for making it very easy as a moderator, because you jumped in and just carried the conversation forward. I am going to say I'm going to challenge Abdul here to maybe put together a male grouping, maybe even before Tuesday, to see whether or not we can get a few guys here talking about the difficulty and the problems that they're facing, and maybe some of the opportunities that they see for their wives, for their daughters, and where do we go from there? And maybe challenge everybody on the call to maybe start something here at AMCHAM so that we can actually build on this conversation, which I think is vitally important to all of us going forward. So thank you very much again for all of you, and have a fabulous rest of the day.